Thank you, Bill. It's wonderful to see a full house here this evening. I think it's wonderful that everyone here is to participate in the democratic process, and we will get started this evening. Welcome to the Democratic primary debate for the 36th Middlesex District. We have this evening Representative Colleen Gary, and we have our challenger and school committee member, Sabrina Heisey. I want to thank Bill for inviting me to be here this evening. It's an honor to participate in this process. We have a limited amount of time, and we want to get to as many questions as possible, and as such, we have a few ground rules. The candidates, and probably most of you are aware of these rules already, but I'm going to read them for the record. First, for the audience, if you haven't already, please take a moment to silence your cell phones, put them in airplane mode. It's hard enough to be up here doing this, and having untimely interruptions can throw people off. So please have the courtesy to do that now. I just did it myself. Second, we will not be asking any gotcha questions, so there is no interest in embarrassing any candidate or anybody else. Personal attacks will not be tolerated. If a candidate intends to make a specific allegation relative to the position or record of the other candidate, they will want to be able to back that up with some sort of evidence. A debate is not a court of law, but unsubstantiated allegations or assertions designed to deceive or confuse voters, particularly this close to the election, do not do a service to the electoral process. Finally, those voters and supporters in attendance should be respectful, as we just discussed, of both candidates. I'm going to actually ask you to hold your applause until the end of the debate because we have a lot to go through, a lot of people here, and it's sometimes a little hard to settle down after we get excited, but I understand how it is. So thank you very much for coming out. The format of the debate this evening, we're going to jump right into questions. Candidates will not be doing opening statements. I will ask the questions of each candidate, and the first candidate has 2 minutes to reply. The other candidate will have a minute to respond, and if needed, there's a 30-second rebuttal. As things are going, we anticipate this will give us about 12 to 14 questions. If we see that the debate is going along, and I will choose to extend it or not, depending on how it's going. Each candidate will then be permitted a 1-minute closing statement. We did a coin flip. Colleen won the coin toss and has chosen to give the last closing statement. Finally, it's important for me to say that it is never easy to run for public office. One is open to vitriol, attacks, and more, and their families. Standing up for what you believe in is important in the political process, and we need more individuals willing to do the work of the people. In our one departure from the applause rule, please welcome your candidates enthusiastically this evening, Representative Colleen Gary and Sabrina Heisey. So this is a bit of a softball question. We're actually going to do equal time on this one, Bill, 2 minutes. I'm going to ask you each, I'm going to start with Sabrina. Will you please tell us a little bit about your educational and professional background outside of holding public office?
Sure. Thank you so much, Jane, for moderating and for your Dracut today. And thank you all for attending tonight. I actually graduated Wentworth Institute of Technology with a computer science degree. I had to work full-time, and I had an academic scholarship and a mountain of student loan debt as a response. My professional background has been in grants administration. I've worked for over a decade in medical research and science and helping scientists fund their work. So I have also worked at movie theaters and bartended. I serve on the school committee currently. I have worked 4 jobs at a time to pay for my student loans and my rent. So I've faced the struggles that many people in this room have faced. And I think I bring that experience to the table as well. Thank you.
Thank you, and I thank everyone involved in this debate. I would like to just take a moment. Dracut lost 2 very special people this week. Mr. Manelis Pappas, who was a World War II veteran, a fighter pilot, an incredible man who never really talked too much about his service, but we want to keep the Pappas family in our prayers, as well as Tommy O'Connor, the longtime plumbing inspector for the town of Dracut. We lost him as well this week, so we keep the O'Connor family in our prayers for their service. I actually was a graduate of Dracut High School in 1980, went on to the University of Lowell it was University of Lowell at the time. I got my biology degree and got the political bug working on a political campaign, got a job as a legislative aide at the State House for then State Representative John Cox. I worked for him for 8 years, and the last 4 years that I was working full-time with him, I went to law school nights at Suffolk University Law School. So I have a practice of family law here in Dracut. It has given me an incredible knowledge of the system and of what families are going through on a day-to-day basis. But my first and foremost job is state representative. And that's my background.
All right, thank you very much. Moving on to our second question, this is also an equal time question. Perhaps all of them should be, but we're gonna follow the format for the most part. I'm gonna start with you, Colleen, however. The National Rifle Association recently released grades for candidates. Colleen, you received a B+ from the NRA, and Sabrina, you were rated an F. Equal time on this one, as I just said. Tell us about your views on Massachusetts gun laws and what, if anything, you might be interested in changing.
Actually, I am a licensed gun owner myself. I don't have a gun, but I have my license to carry. I received that after San Bernardino. I realized how important it was that we would be able to defend ourselves should terrorism occur. Let me be perfectly clear that that might be a rating, but I have not received any money from any NRA or Goal or any of the organizations involved with that. There is no endorsements. There are ratings. There's no endorsements, no money, no nothing. I believe that people have a right to have a weapon to secure their property, their family, and I do have been the one, probably the B+ is because I did vote for the toughest gun law in the nation. Massachusetts has the toughest gun law in the nation, and I voted for that. I also voted to eliminate, to ban the bump stocks. I did, however, not vote for the emergency extreme risk protection order because it did nothing to try to get help for the person who might be at risk for hurting themselves or hurting others. That was the most important thing. The so-called ERPO bill is a feel-good piece of legislation, but it does nothing to get the dangerous person help so that they are not a danger any longer.
All right, thank you. Sabrina.
So I believe in people's right to own a weapon, but as a mom to 6 children, when I see a school shooting, I think about where are my kids at that moment, and how many parents have looked at the TV and said, I kissed my kid this morning, are they okay? And as a parent and as a person who wants public safety, I believe in things like the Extreme Risk Protection Order, which was endorsed by the police. What that bill does is make sure that when somebody needed a weapon taken away temporarily while they sought services, that was okay. And the fact that Representative Gary is the only Democrat to have voted against the right to make sure that people who are a homicidal or suicidal risk do not have access to a weapon, I think is a letdown of public safety and of parents who would like to know that if somebody is already deemed a risk, that they cannot go out and purchase a weapon. So I believe in your right to own a weapon. I don't believe in the rights of people to own a weapon who have a violent past or current, tendencies. I believe in improving our mental health system and improving the number of beds in psychiatric help in the state to make sure that when somebody has it, they don't sit in a waiting room for 4 days to get services. So I believe in the right to own weapons as long as we are having common sense, and the fact that Massachusetts does a great job about it is a testimony to our tough gun laws. And I really believe that when things come up, legislators need to make sure we are evaluating the risk and the benefits, and I believe that ERPA was a good solution for the state, and the fact that we are protecting our children and our citizens, you just can't do enough for public safety. So I would have supported that.
Thank you, Sabrina. Colleen, you were mentioned directly for being the only Democrat that voted against it. She brought that up, so you have a 30-second rebuttal.
It's funny because I think if you look at the history of the violence that is occurring in our nation today, it's not all guns. We had a young woman who was stabbed to death in Winchester Library. This thing would have done nothing to help protect that woman. We have people who are driving planes into houses. We have people who are running cars onto sidewalks. This ERPO bill was nothing but feel good, and to be honest, and I've seen it, it is used in the courts all the time. The restraining orders are used in the courts. these ERPO bills would be used against police officers in particular who have a right to carry a gun and require a gun for their job, and all they have to do is have an ex-girlfriend or someone say that they're a risk,
I'm going to
and
cut you
their
off.
job.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. So, Sabrina, we're going to move to you now in our next question. You ran for this office very quickly after being elected to school committee. And I know that's come up in some conversation. So tell us about why you've moved really fast in your political career.
I think that it is really important to address the root of the problem. It did not take a year on the school committee to understand that the problems that we're facing are at the state level. I can't fix our budget from the local level. We can fix policy, we can evaluate the superintendent, and we can make sure that the money is tracked with transparency. But we cannot fix the failure of the State House. The Massachusetts Chapter 70 law has been in place since 1993. It has not been updated. When given chances to update it, it has not come to a conclusion. We are failing our children, and what happens is families move in. I'll meet them at the Dracut Moms Group, which I'm a member of. I'll meet them there. They'll love it here, they'll love this community, and they'll be invested here. But then when their children enter school, they'll worry about the quality of their children's education, and they will move. And we have seen that through our enrollment numbers at the schools. The only way to fix that is at the state level, and currently the State House is failing to address the underlying problem with the budget, which is if you want a better quality of education for your children, you need to move to another community. The only way to fix it is Prop 2.5 overrides, which have been divisive, which have been unfair to local people who feel like they can't afford more taxes. The current system does not work for us. The way they want to update it by the commission report from 2014 will perpetuate the same problem down the road. If you want a better quality of education, you have to move. And I did not see a State House fighting for the basic right for public education where it does not matter your zip code. Kids deserve the same quality of education. And you can perpetuate that out to Chapter 90. You deserve to be safe with a fully staffed police and fire station, regardless of your zip code. So once I saw that the root of the problem was at the State House, I immediately decided that we need to fix it there.
Thank you. Colleen, you have a minute to respond.
It is very, very funny that Ms. Heisey thinks that the problems are here at the State House. The fact of the matter is, besides Mass Health, education gets the vast majority of the extra money in the budget. And frankly, for all those educators out there who educate in Dracut and Tingsboro and the region, you're insulting. They do a tremendous job in this community and in Tingsboro to educate our children. And I wouldn't diminish anything to say that money is the only reason that kids are going to get a good education. The fact of the matter is, Dracut gets almost 50% of their budget paid for by the state. Tingsboro gets almost as much as well. And the fact is, you would have thought that a sitting school committeeman might actually reach out to the legislature to say, hey, here's my idea. Why don't we try to fix it? The only time I heard from you was, can you explain the formula to me? And I did. And from then on, nothing. So I'd like to know what your plan is. What exactly are you going to do to fund Dracut education from the state level?
All right, Sabrina, you have a rebuttal.
I think that the fact that teachers here are paid less is actually insulting to our educators. They're working the best they have in this district, and that is in no way a knock against the teachers, but teachers in this district know that they could go make more money elsewhere, and many choose to do so, as you can see from our retention rates. We absolutely value our educators, but the fact is that Dracut has less per pupil to spend, and thus we can't spend as much on the teachers. And the real value is teachers. It's not a building. A building won't teach your children. It is the quality of the education that you receive, and that means the extras. So that means that you will get a higher quality of education depending on where you live. Now, in terms of how we fund it, we are going to reimburse the district at the actual cost of educating a child and not at a one-size-fits-all current model. We're going to fully fund the circuit breaker at 75% instead of underfunding it every single year.
And how much is that going to cost?
I'm still the moderator.
Yeah.
I get to be moderator.
She still hasn't answered the question.
Well, I was going to go there.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
got you. I got you. We're going to have a good debate. No, you didn't answer quite the question. You did touch on it. Yeah, I know. I got you, and I'm glad that we respect Bill. You talked a little bit about it when you started talking about the circuit breaker.
Right.
And so tell us a little bit more about what your solution or what some of the ideas you want to bring to the State House are.
Sure. So I was supportive of the Fair Share Amendment, which is a 4% tax on people who make an annual income of more than $1 million a year. The majority of those people don't actually live in our district. There's only 9 people in the district that would be affected by that additional 4% tax revenue. But that is proposed to raise another $1 billion to $2 billion projected, and that money could be invested back into education and transportation. But essentially, what we need to do is make sure that districts aren't funding their children at $25,000 per student, where Dracut can only get $11,000 per student. We can never keep up with the Joneses, and you shouldn't have to move to get a quality public education. This is a public service. So I would fund it through cutting corporate tax, in cutting corporate loopholes on taxes and fair share amendments, progressive tax rates.
Okay. Colleen, I'm going to give you 15 seconds to respond to that, please, Bill. And
Well, the Fair Share Act was voted, went to court and was denied to be on the ballot. So that's done. You also talk about telling other communities that they can't override 2.5. Who are we to tell other communities that they can't override 2.5 because it's going to make us look worse?
Am I allowed to respond to that?
you can respond to that.
The fact that we allow them to override 2.5 means that they will always have a higher quality of education. We need to set a ceiling. We need to have the state formula recognize that communities like Dracut and Tingsboro can't rely solely on economic development, as we are right on the southern New Hampshire border. The formula does not take those unique circumstances into account. So we need to have a formula that recognizes that, and so when we update the formula, it needs to be more than just economic development.
Okay, we're going to move on. I promise
Okay.
I didn't plan this. But Colleen, let's talk about economic development.
Absolutely.
That's the next question. What did Dracut and Tingsboro need from Beacon Hill in order to spur development? Do you agree with the direction of economic development in these communities in recent years? And pile right on, how are we doing for affordable housing in that same pocket? So if you can kind of give us a mishmash there. You have 2 minutes.
So actually, Dracut and Tingsboro are doing incredible work on economic development. You just have to go down a little bit further down the road to the $2.5 million Mass Works grant that brought in a commitment of $60 million in buildings and healthcare facilities that are bringing 300 jobs to our community, giving assisted living programs here so that people who grew up and were raised in this community can stay in this community. We're having health care here in the community. In Tingsboro, we're having another $2.5 million Mass Works grant that's going out at Flint Corner, and that's going to be in conjunction with revamping Flint Corner for housing and for development. And so we're doing extremely well with that, and with that will come more money. That if you go to the Broadway Road project, you're going to see that people are going to come visit the people and go to restaurants locally. They're going to go to stores locally. That is all revenue that is going to come and help our communities. The fact of the matter is, and I get back to the education part, is that the formula does take into consideration the commercial base of the community. If you look at the difference between Dracut and Burlington, Dracut, not much commercial, Burlington, entirely commercial. Dracut gets 50% reimbursement of funds for state funds, and Burlington gets 15. So it certainly is in that. And the other important part about the education reform is that it is susceptible to a court case, and it has to be approved by the courts, any major changes. But after a 2-year-long look at the formula, the 4 parts that were identified are in the formula that I support, the proposals in the House and the Senate.
Thank you.
Sabrina, would you like to, you have a minute to talk about economic development?
I think that economic development, building small mom and pop shops in these towns, in this district, is really the goal that we need to be having. We want to make sure that people who live here can build a business here, and that we're giving tax incentives to local and small businesses who want to open here. I want to say that it is incredibly difficult to balance the needs of, we need to protect our open space as well, but we also need to develop in order to have tax revenue. So I don't want those two items to conflict, because we really do need to protect the natural resources that are in this district. So we don't actually want to overdevelop, because we need to save those for the next generation. So I want to make sure that our economic development is local, is for local families. And in terms of housing, I actually don't think we do a very good job. The definition of affordable housing at the state level does not help the districts actually build affordable housing, and the fact that units built as affordable expire and have an expiration date, even though they use tax dollars, means that everything built in the 90s expired in the early 2000s, and then prices have continued to go up. So we have a real transitional housing crisis, even in this area, of kids who grew up here who cannot afford to continue to stay here or buy a home here.
Okay, thank you. Do you have a rebuttal or anything?
I do believe that there are a lot of affordable homes, and Primrose Village was one that was a special project. Some did not get picked up and ended up being sold at market rate, and that's a shame. And that's something that I'm working with the town administrator, the town manager, to try to increase that availability, to market it to people who need those homes, and we're going to continue to do that. But I agree with Mrs. Heisey that development has to be done in the right way, that quality of life and of our communities are at risk, and we need to do it the proper way.
Thank you. All right, Sabrina, moving along. Local chiefs of police have expressed deep skepticism about safe injection sites as a way to treat the opioid and substance abuse crisis that we're experiencing all across the Merrimack Valley. Do you support that idea for Dracut and Tingsboro?
I think safe injection sites are something that have proven successful in other places. I think that opioids are a much wider issue than just safe injection sites. What we really need to do is talk about wraparound model services, because in the last 5 years, 31 families in Dracut and 11 in Tingsboro have lost a loved one to opioids. So we have a local problem where 42 families have now lost a loved one and income and have more on their plate. There are 4,000 treatment beds in Massachusetts, and only 868 are for detox. So we are not doing a very good job of making sure that people who need the services are getting the services. I think of opioids as a healthcare crisis. Somebody is in pain, somebody is addicted to something, which is a substance. That is a medical treatment. We need them to be able to see their primary care doctor, to be able to get help and services through their doctor, which means we have to make sure that it is not criminalized to the point where the people are afraid to seek care. If somebody goes into a hospital room, giving them Narcan is not enough. We need to make sure that social services is involved, that we have help in the hospitals, that we have help at the police stations. I think it's really important to see them as a person who is suffering, and that if safe injection sites will prevent the spread of disease, which we have seen go up as opioids have become a problem, I think that I would be open to that. But what I really think we need to do is see them as a human being in need, and that this is a healthcare crisis for them and their entire family.
Thank you. Colleen?
I am absolutely against injection sites. To perpetrate the ability for someone to shoot up in a location to say that, well, this is a safe site. I have observed a situation where someone had 4 Narcans applied to them and almost didn't make it. So you would be putting it out there that, yes, you will survive an overdose here. You might not. The Narcan might not work. Fact of the matter is, we have been taking the opioid crisis very seriously in the State House. This is the 3rd year in a row we've added to more and more processes to get more help for people. We've had $142 million for the Bureau of Substance Addiction. We're adding 5 new recovery centers. We're doing $5 million in community-based treatment, $4.9 million for step-down recovery, and $1 million for access for Narcan. I believe that we need to do more, and one of the things is to provide methadone and Suboxone in the hospital. I do agree with the governor that there needs to be a 72-hour hold. That did not pass, but I voted for it, and I think that we need to get as much process out there for everyone. My biggest concern are the children of the addicts now. We're seeing them growing up in DCF. We're seeing them growing up in grandparents' homes. There is a generation at risk here, and we need to be able to have the mental health treatment for those children involved.
Thank you. Do you have a rebuttal?
I do. As a DCF foster parent and adoptive parent, I have witnessed firsthand a generation, but it's also important to understand that those people need health care, and Representative Gary worked with Charlie Baker to try to throw 100,000 people off of Mass Health. So that is really not taking seriously the healthcare crisis of our neediest children and their parents who need to get clean and sober. So I would say that it's about seeing people as human beings and understanding that healthcare is a human right.
Thank you. Colleen, since she mentioned your name specifically,
Right.
I'm going to give you a chance to respond to that.
I think she's just mistaken here. I would put it that way because I don't want her to feel that I'm attacking her in any way, shape, or form. But the 140,000 people, do you realize we have over 2 million people on Mass Health? And it's increasing day after day. And we have to worry about how we can afford it. We are just alone, the children on Mass Health or with DCF is almost $1 billion right now. Children in DCF. We need to be able to provide for them. But what we did try to do, and I want to correct you on that, is that there were 140,000 people who have some SSI benefits, and they were given more recognition to exempt them from counting than people who have veterans benefits or disability benefits. Those people had their benefits counted, but these able-bodied 140,000 people who had SSI were not being counted. And it wasn't throwing them off Mass Health, it was allowing them to go to the Health Connector. And frankly, there are a lot of people who have access to health care and they want to stay on Mass Health because they don't want to pay copays. We cannot continue to do that. If you have access to health care, use your access to health care. Don't live on the family dole, on the state dole.
Thank you. Sabrina, can you just respond to the one piece there at the end about the 140,000, that one piece, SSI going to?
Sure. I think that we have a healthcare crisis where it is a cost crisis for families, where people are taking, I spoke to a man who took an Uber from his home in Dracut to Lowell General because he had a $500 copay for the last ambulance ride that he took. It's not that people want to live off the state, it's that their health is in crisis, and that if they're not getting the preventative health that they need when they need to see a primary care doctor, it costs the state more. So we need to make sure that everybody has coverage and is insured.
Thank you.
And the 140 were able-bodied individuals who were staying on Mass Health rather than having to pay a copay.
Thank you. I let that conversation go on because it morphed from opioids into healthcare a little bit, and I thought that was a good conversation to continue having just for the audience. All right, so Colleen, we're talking about health. I swear I didn't plan this again. Circle Health Dracut is slated to open soon, and a ballot question this fall may impact operations by creating patient-to-nurse ratios. Nurses seem divided on this issue. Tell us where you stand on the ballot question and talk a little bit about that.
I'm actually against the ballot question. I've spoken to many nurses that are very concerned that this has happened out in California, but it was processed over a 5-year period of time. We would have, if this ballot question passes, we would have 37 days to come up with 6,000 nurses to cover the bedsides, or there would be a $25,000 fine a day for the hospital. There was no fine for the hospitals in California, and like I said, they had 5 years to put this together. We allowed, in the last time we debated this, we ended up doing a nurse staff patient ratio at the ICUs. And that was, I think it works well. But I've heard from a lot of nurses who feel that this is going to be done too quickly. It's going to be too costly. We don't have enough nurses. We need more nurse educators so that we can have more programs for nursing and get and build the ability to have nurses in the Commonwealth before we mandate this on the local hospitals.
Thank you. Sabrina.
I am actually proudly endorsed by the Massachusetts Nurses Association, and I am voting yes on one. For me, this was an easy question. I have twins who are now 4, but when my daughter Calypso was 1, we were on a family vacation in Florida, and her brother took a nighttime pill to help him sleep, and she picked it up and she just put it in her mouth, and we immediately grabbed it, but enough got in. It is a one pill can kill scenario, and at home we have really, really good control of the medication. We were on vacation, and I turned my back for 1 second. We ended up in the pediatric ICU. It was the second hospital we went to. She took charcoal. She was totally fine. But that patient ratio with that pediatric ICU was 8 children to 1 nurse. So for me, this was a very much a no-brainer that I was not leaving that room as my child sat in there for monitoring for that night. And I want everybody to have the level of care that they need, whether they need a one-on-one nurse or whether they need 4-on-1. I think it's important to understand that the legislature delayed the marijuana question so that they could get it up and running. They could do the same for nursing. They can delay it and make sure that it rolls out safely and effectively. The 37 days assumes that they can't do anything to fix it when they can.
Colleen, would you like to respond to
I
that?
would just say that only one union is endorsing this question as nurses. There is the American Nurses Association, which is against this ballot question, and they are the majority of nurses in the Commonwealth.
Okay, thank you. Sabrina, let's talk about campaign finance.
Sure.
We're asking both candidates, this is an equal time question, bill is equal time. Tell us about your donors. Are they local? Are they out of town? Are they labor unions? Are they PACs, special interest? Folks can go online and look this stuff up on your own, ocpf.us if you wish. I looked at it today, but because they all had to be filed yesterday. But tell us a little bit about your donors. Go ahead.
Sure. So I am running for statewide office. So many of my donors are local and throughout the state. Many are family and friends. I have gotten many endorsements, so those also come with money in certain cases. But what's interesting about my donors is a lot of the bigger money people I actually don't know. You can look at my campaign finance and see that at some point I did try a fundraising consultant because turns out that's actually not the best thing for me. I'm not a great fundraiser, but I did try my best, and I tried to get help when I needed it. But it turns out that many people from the LGBTQ community within Massachusetts who are aligned with mass equality, the Stonewall Dems, all knew who my opponent was. So when I announced, they donated on their own without me asking. So there's a lot of family and friends in there. There's a lot of people from my Emerge network, from my professional network, and everybody in my OCPF is a Democrat and votes for democratic values. So I'm very proud to have raised the money I have and to have the support locally from my family and friends and statewide.
Thank you. Colleen.
Well, what she doesn't tell you is she did a great job raising money. Only 12% of it came from individuals from the town of Dracut, and not a dime came from from Tingsboro. 12% of $21,000. And she didn't tell you that 5 of her donors are multimillionaires who are investing in buying this seat for the progressive agenda. Now, I look at mine. I've never had a $1,000 donor. And certainly if I had a $1,000 donor, I would know who they were. 55% of my donations are individuals in this community, in this district, Dracut and Tingsboro. There are some unions involved. There are some people I've gotten to know over the time. I believe the largest donation I have right now is $500 from my own insurance agent who used to live in Tingsboro, who now lives in Lowell. A very good man to this community and the greater Lowell area. So, you know, I have said this from day one. This district is the people of Dracut and Tingsboro's district. I will not allow these multimillionaires, these progressive investors, to come in here and buy your seat. That's what's happening.
Sabrina, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, I would.
Wait.
I would.
Hold on. You wait. Yeah. Oh,
Because I actually would love to know which of mine are millionaire friends. I don't actually have millionaire friends. What happens is people have gay and lesbian children and have seen across the state an effort to throw them under the bus. And so when I ran, they decided to invest in my campaign without even having a conversation with me. That shows you the level of human decency that Representative Gary has not had for the LGBTQ community ever in the 24 years, and that's why people donated to me without me even talking to them. So I actually don't know the millionaire people, but they know who you are.
Hold on one second. I'm going to ask the audience to keep your commentary down while the candidates are talking. Thank you. Colleen, can you respond to the comments about the LGBTQ community?
You know what? It has been an attack that has happened from day one, and it is mischaracterizing my votes. I represent the people of this district. When the gay marriage ballot question was being asked to be put on the ballot, I had a petition of over 1,000 registered voters in my district who asked me to vote to put it on the ballot. I felt it was my position as a representative of this district to put it on the ballot. Secondly, maybe I'm not good enough to tout my own horn, but I was working with a group with Eileen Isaacson and others in the gay community, with legislators, with stakeholders behind the scenes, to try to get a full, all rights, all benefits of marriage, but under the name of civil union or domestic partnership. We were working to do that, to make sure that the rights and benefits were allowed for same-sex couples. Before we come to resolution, the court case came down, and it was granted, and everything was a done deal. But to say that I am this hatred person who hates gay and lesbians, and it's just not who I am, and the people of this district know who I am. It's these outsiders that you've been really good at working instead of being at Dracut High graduation. You've been the one that's touting all of this and this hatred, and it's not true. You don't know me. You don't know my votes. You don't know what I've been doing for my district. And I have talked to many people in the transgender community, and I've said, help me fill that loophole that's in the law that allows anyone to be in the wrong bathroom and just claim that there's transgender. Help me fix that. And no one has come forward to fix it.
So you've switched the topic again, so I'm going to give you 15 seconds because we are getting late, and I got a bunch more questions here to serve the voters. So 15 seconds, please, just on the transgender.
Separate is not equal in marriage. There is no loophole in an anti-discrimination law. You either believe in discrimination or you do not.
Okay. Colleen, some people describe you as a Some people describe you as a Democrat in name only, and this is the Democratic primary.
Right.
And I know you've heard this before, a dino. So do your personal views and voting record put you at odds with the values of Democrats?
You know what? I think that the progressive group has taken over the Democratic Party. They have done it by taking up all these add-ons, and they've changed the agenda of the Democratic Party. And I am the old-fashioned Democrat. I am the JFK Democrat, although my opponent says we shouldn't have any JFK Democrats, but she puts this quote on a piece of mailing that she does. She must like them. So the fact of the matter is, I am a Democrat. I've been a Democrat my entire life, and I'm not going to have anybody push me out of my party.
Thank you. Sabrina?
I'm very proud to be a progressive. I am not the only progressive that lives in this district who wants to see the district move forward. The fact is that the State House is not responsive to our needs. And since it is a supermajority of Democrats, we have to change the party in order to get progress at the State House. They have been slow to respond. They have failed us on education, on housing, on health care. And the fact is that if we want to change the state, we have to change the party. So I'm very proud to be part of a district that wants to move forward and not remain in the past.
Colleen, do you want to respond to that?
You know what? As she said, she wants to take over the Democratic Party. The problem is the progressives in the State House are the ones who will not compromise. That's why things are not getting done. We can't dare to compromise on climate. We can't dare to compromise on education. We can't dare to compromise on health care. When you've got 200 legislators from all different districts fighting to get some resolution, compromise is not a bad word. It's how things get done. And that's not what's happening at the State House because of the strong progressives who will not negotiate and compromise anything.
Thank you. Okay, Sabrina, how do you feel about sanctuary cities and a proposal by a different candidate in a totally different race for Massachusetts to become a sanctuary state?
So I do support the Safe Communities Act, which would bar the state from creating a Muslim registry. It was endorsed by the police. What I want is my local police and fire to be able to work with people regardless of their status when they're solving local crimes. So if somebody is sexually assaulted but they are undocumented, they would not be able to safely go to the police if we do not have protection for them to make sure that their immigration status isn't used against them. So I do support it. It does still allow for some cooperation in terms of holding somebody for up to 6 hours, so that is a compromise. And I would say that it's not a great one, but it's something that I would still support. So I do support the Safe Communities Act. I think it is time for us as a state to say that our local police officers need to act as local agents and not as federal agents. The federal government funds federal agencies, and frankly, we don't have enough money to fund our police as is. So I don't want them to have to do extra work for the federal government in solving local crime.
Thank you. Colleen.
Safe Communities, a nice, sweet name for sanctuary cities. The fact of the matter is, if you have illegals who are here in Massachusetts and the police are involved, they should be able to report them to the federal immigration agencies. Maybe you don't realize that there have been people in this district who have been impacted by illegal immigrants and terrorism. That's happened. Families in this district have been affected. And all law enforcement have to work together for the safety of all our communities, whether it's Dracut, Tingsboro, Boston. You saw at the Boston bombing how all the communities, all the police officers worked together and found the perpetrators. But this is what needs to be done to keep our communities safe.
Thank you. Sabrina, do you have a... Folks, we got to save it for the end, please. Sabrina, do you have a rebuttal?
I advocate that our local police have a lot on their plates. And then I have heard police officers testify that said, when we go in and we start looking for a criminal, we don't have to ask anybody's immigration status. And that's wonderful right now. But if that changes and the federal government is requiring, or they are being required to ask, they understand that they're on the front lines of not being able to get the information from the community that they need. So it is about police protecting and serving the community. And I support our police officers who support it.
Thank you. All right, Colleen, so we touched on this question actually a little bit earlier. Yep. And I want you to, maybe we'll take a little bit less time because we talked about it before, but I think it's important to kind of just focus in on this issue, is the millionaire's tax or the fair share amendment, and which was proposed for a ballot question. It was rejected by the SJC. It was slated to raise, in the marketing, $2 billion with a 4% surcharge on incomes over $1 million, not assets, but incomes. Would you support an additional surcharge on these high incomes?
No, I do not support it. I did not support the ballot, the initiative. I thought it was unconstitutional. I think that where New Hampshire is right adjacent to us, and these people who are millionaires, they can very easily change their address to New Hampshire to their lake home, and we lose even more money. So I think that it's important that we look to everyone to share in the expenses and not just label those who are very good to charities in the communities and keep them here in our Commonwealth.
Thank you. Great. Can you give us a short comment?
I do support the Fair Share Amendment. It was only found unconstitutional because they tried to put education and healthcare on, education and transportation on the same question, which was the part that was deemed unconstitutional. I think that people who make an annual income of over $1 million can pay a little bit extra to make sure that we all have good roads and good schools. And frankly, the alternative is to continue Prop 2.5 overrides. That's the alternative, is to tax the people who can't afford it. And right now, this district has a lot of people who can't afford it. So I support taxing people who can afford a little bit extra to make sure that the entire state has transportation and education.
Thank you. Colleen, do you want to respond to that?
From my numbers, there's 13,000 people in the Commonwealth out of 6 million who are going to be taking up the expenses of this. And honestly, I don't think it covers everything you want it to cover, and we still haven't gotten to single payer and all that stuff. So I think that it is unfair to ask 13 out of 6 million people to pick up and pay the rate.
Okay. All right, so it's a little bit of a fun question. This is the Democratic primary, and school's beginning. I don't know exactly when school begins in the district here. Parents, when does school begin?
Next Wednesday.
Next Wednesday?
Tingsboro started today.
Okay, well, Tewksbury's tomorrow. I should go home and be with my children. School's about to begin. Give us a letter grade for Charlie Baker being governor. I heard this question in another debate. I love it. So this question is first to Sabrina, but it's sort of an equal time. What's your grade for Charlie?
I'm going to give Charlie a D. There's a couple things that he's done. He did have a decent proposal on housing that I thought was okay. But otherwise, the problem with having a supermajority Democratic legislature and Senate and a Republican governor is that they can appoint. There's a few things I'd give him credit for. He is pro-choice. He is pro-LGBTQ. So I'll give him points for that. But otherwise, I think it's time to replace him.
Thank you. Colleen, grade.
I would give him a B+. I have never seen in all these years a governor or lieutenant governor coming to these small communities as much as they have. They were the ones that focused on these Mass Works grants that brought $5 million into 2 small towns. They have been here in the district. They are very thoughtful, as in thinking things through, not just being kind. They have been able to work with so many people and cross the aisle. We have worked together on trying to get rid of the golden parachutes of administrators and make sure that the taxpayers aren't paying for that. I give Charlie Baker and Karen Polito a B+, because there's always room for improvement.
All right, thank you. All right, so these are a couple. The next few questions are kind of a little light. We all take a deep breath. This is a little bit of fun. All right, Colleen, what are your predictions this year for the Thanksgiving Day rivalry games in your district? You don't have to give me a score.
Well, I did hear that the band is much smaller at Dracut High this year, so that has to be taken into account. But I think that we have a pretty good game. My brother-in-law, is the team going to be okay, you think? All right. So we're going to say Dracut beats Methuen, and Ryan, Tingsboro will be okay? All right. Dracut and Tingsboro are both going to win.
All right, great. I assume, Sabrina, you're not going to be too divergent from that.
You would never root against the home team.
No. All right, so this question's for you, Sabrina. Who is your favorite Red Sox player, and how do you think they're going to do this year? Will they make 115? This is a serious question
Of all
for
time?
me. Yeah, I'm just saying.
David Ortiz is my favorite of all time. In the 04 Red Sox riots, I actually lived in Fenway at the time, and I didn't know. I was walking down the street in excitement that we had just won, and I saw this fog, and I thought somebody had lit something on fire because, you know, college kids light things on fire. It turns out it was tear gas. I had no idea, so I was accidentally tear gassed in the 04 Red Sox riots, which is a story I'm going to tell my grandchildren, but I've been a lifelong Red Sox fan. I have a Red Sox tattoo, and it's our family is baseball and Patriots, and he's been my favorite because he's just such a wonderful person.
Yeah, but are they going to make 115?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, have you seen them playing lately?
Well, they've been a little slump. Colleen, what do you think? Red Sox, who's your favorite player?
You know, I think mine is not actually a player. It is a part of the administration. Larry Lucchino was very, very kind to my parents. They came down to see the trophy at the State House, and one of my colleagues brought them over. My dad was in a wheelchair, and Larry came over and took his World Series ring off and put it on my father. And it was a moment that will never be forgotten, and I appreciated that greatly. So Larry, I think, is the best Red Sox ever.
Thank you. All right. The last one was to Sabrina. Colleen, what's your favorite restaurant and shop in your district? Have I caused a problem? I do that. I do that.
I have been on the tour of the ice cream stands. If you have been following me on Facebook, there are.
You do it. Just
you know what?
Give us your sense.
You know what? It's brought me good luck all these years.
Emily and I enjoy Mama's a lot. In Tingsboro, there is another adoptive family who owns Funtageous, and just being able to connect with them over the issues that we face as adoptive parents has been wonderful. So they would be my favorite local spot.
Thank you. All right, so we've come to the closing statements portion. You guys have done a great job. We've had a lot of great debate this evening. Sabrina, you go first.
Sure.
And this is a 1-minute close.
Thank you all so much for attending. In the last 24 years, we've had representation that puts her own ideology and friends above the needs of the residents of this district. She holds no leadership roles, doesn't bring home the resources that our district leaves, and leaves our communities fighting each other at the local level for every dollar. I chose this district as my home, as the place to raise my 6 children, and I will fight tooth and nail for every single resident, not just the majority, also the underdogs and the people who are in minorities. This district has been left behind in Beacon Hill, but it's time for them to hear us now. I will fight for a government that is good government, that is transparent and open. If Washington, D.C. is a swamp, the Beacon Hill State House is a cesspool in terms of transparency, so it's time for them to be accountable to us, the voters. And I would like to ask for your vote on September 4th, because I believe this district should be living in 2018 and not in 1960.
Thank you. Colleen, can we have your closing statement?
Thank you. Jane, I want to thank you for moderating. I want to thank Bill for hosting and the American Legion. I want to thank Sabrina for running a tough campaign, and I appreciate all of the people who support both of us and participate in the acts of democracy. I appreciate the voters for taking part. I appreciate all of you who are here tonight. To the voters of Dracut and Tingsboro, it has been my honor and privilege to have had your trust to serve you and your families over the last 24 years. I have never used my position as state representative as a stepping stone. My first and last and only concern is how legislation is going to affect my district and how I can help the people of Dracut and Tingsboro. I have a strong record. I'm proud of my record. You can just ask me. I have brochures with the records. There is nothing that I do more than try to help the community of Dracut and Tingsboro and the community members and provide leadership and service to the residents of this district and serve on Beacon Hill. Again, I thank you very much for your past support, and I ask for your continued support. Continue to put your trust in me to serve you, your interest only, and the district. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to sincerely thank the audience. Folks at home don't know how packed this room is, and you have all done really an exceptional job. You've respected our candidates. Thank you very much. Give yourselves a round of applause. Give our candidates a round of applause. Give Bill a round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. That was a tough
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Dracut American Legion and the second of our 2 debates this evening. My name is Bill Gilman. I am the publisher of Third Strand Media. We produce online news and information sites, hyperlocal. We are the publishers of YourDracutToday.com and YourTewksburyToday.com. And we're hosting the debate tonight in cooperation or teamwork with Dracut Access Television. DATV is taping tonight's event. The first chance you're going to be able to see it is Wednesday night at 7 p.m. on Channel 99. But also, it'll be run several times between now and the primary. It will also be on their video on demand page on their website, so you'll be able to see that. Earlier this evening, we had the Democratic primary debate for the 36th Middlesex District. Now we are going to have the Democratic primary debate for the state Senate seat, which is up for grabs for the 2nd Essex Middlesex District. And I would like to introduce tonight's candidates first. To my immediate left, we have Mike Armano, and to his left, we have Attorney Barry Feingold. So what I would ask those in attendance tonight, we've got an excellent crowd here at the American Legion, is if you would save your applause until the end of tonight so that we can, that's going to serve two purposes. One, so that we can keep moving through our questions, but also if there's too much noise, too much chatter or too much noise from the audience, it's going to make it very difficult to hear the candidates. And that's what we're here for, to give them a chance to get their viewpoints and their positions out. The format is going to be that we're going to be asking questions. Each candidate, or the candidate that is asked a question, will have 2 minutes to answer that question. The other candidate will then have a minute to respond, and then there's a chance for a 30-second rebuttal if that's appropriate. There will also be a couple of questions that will be equal time questions, and I'll let the candidates know what those are. I'll be keeping track of the time here. Let's see. I think that's all that we need to know right now. And just as a exception to the applause rule, as we get started here, I'd like to invite the audience here to give a round of applause for the two candidates for State Senate.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, as we go through the questions, we are not going to be having opening statements. There will be, however, 1-minute closing statements. Before the event, we had a coin flip. Mike Armano won the coin flip. He chose to go first in the closing statements. So when that time comes, he will go first, and then Attorney Feingold will go second. All right. We're going to start with the first question to, first question is going to be of both candidates, actually, and it is going to be an equal time question, 2 minutes each for this. Aside from your public service, aside from any elected office you may have held, could you let the voters know a little bit about your education, background, and professional experience that makes you qualified to hold the position in the state Senate? We'll start with Mike Armano.
Sure. In 2003, I graduated from the Massachusetts School of Law. I took 3 bar exams, passed them all, Maine, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts. I practiced law for about 8 years. While I was in law school, I did a little substitute teaching, coached high school wrestling for about 15 years, and 8 years after practicing law, I got the call to become a firefighter. In the fire service, I became an EMT, a lieutenant. I'm currently the lieutenant of fire prevention. Have some training in emergency management and community risk reduction. And in my role currently as a lieutenant in the city of Lawrence, I serve on the Mayor's Distressed Property Task Force. I work with different department heads. I draft ordinances on behalf of the chief. I work with planning and community development, zoning, and I also do some arson investigation work.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Armano. Mr. Feingold.
Well, Bill, first of all, thank you so much for having this debate. I appreciate Mike as well for participating. When I was growing up, I was only really good at 2 things: arguing at the dinner table and playing Monopoly, and I've kind of stuck to that the rest of my life. I would graduate from Andover High. I played football there, played for Dick Collins, who was like a legendary coach, like Dracut's own late Ed Murphy. Was able to go to college. I unloaded trucks at 3 in the morning to pay for my own college. My parents were both teachers, didn't have a lot of money, so I basically helped put myself through college. Like Mike, I also went to the Mass School of Law, and I paid for my own way. Started a law firm, and now it's one of the largest in the Merrimack Valley, top 100 in the state. And I also got a full scholarship to attend the Kennedy School at Harvard. But someone that has never been given anything, someone's always been about working hard, and that has been kind of the mantra of what I've always done.
Thank you, Mr. Feingold. Excellent. This next question is also going to be an equal time question, and it came up, I wasn't going to ask this, but it came up in the last debate that there seems to be a battle. This is a Democratic primary debate, and there seems to be a battle going on for the identity of the Democratic Party in Massachusetts. So we'll start with you, Mr. Feingold. Can you give us a sense of how you view what it means to be a Democrat, what the values are that you see the Democratic Party in Massachusetts should have?
Well, first of all, Bill, I think it's a good question, but I'm not a fan of labels. I just do what I think is right. Sometimes it's not popular, but I stand on principle. And some people can say there are positions I have that are progressive, that are moderate. I'm not interested in labels. But what I am interested in doing is doing what's right, fighting hard for communities like Dracut, fighting to increase money for education, for circuit breaker reimbursement. And those are things I'm focused on. And I'm not interested in labels. I'm not about, you know, what someone decides what we should be called. I'm about getting the job done, and I think that's what we all should be focused on.
Thank you, Mr. Feingold. Mr. Amano, same question.
Sure. I think, you know, my family has a long tradition of public service dating back from my great-grandfather, who was a union president for the mill workers. He represented thousands of working-class people in Lawrence and throughout New England. My grandfather was a police officer and the union president for the police and a city councilor. And my father, who's in the audience today, is a 32-year firefighter in the city of Lawrence. I think throughout that history, my family's always preached democratic values, and I think the Democrats are about people more than anything, in community. When I think Democrat, I think of labor and hardworking people. I think of vulnerable populations. I think of people who are starting their life in the United States of America, like young immigrants who are looking for a chance. A lot of these values we see every day in the Merrimack Valley, and I think they're strong values. And when people work together, they can help other people and make the whole community strong, and that's what being a Democrat is all about.
Thank you, Mr. Amano. All right. Moving into some of the issue-oriented questions here. The opiate epidemic, and we're going to be going to Mr. Amano with this question. The opiate epidemic is something that has become a plague, really, in Massachusetts and certainly here in the Merrimack Valley. There have been a number of suggestions on how to deal with it, from mental health care to increased counseling programs, increased hospital beds. But one of the newer things is the so-called safe injection sites that have been talked about. Now, this district includes some towns, but also the city of Lawrence as well. So the question is, how do you feel about safe injection sites as a tool of combating the opiate epidemic, and how do you see the overall battle? What needs to be done in that overall battle?
So as a firefighter, I see this problem every day in the streets of the city of Lawrence, but I also see it as a resident of Dracut and going through the streets of Tewksbury and Andover. I have, even in my neighborhood, I have people, we've found you know, a neighbor face down in the driveway who suffers from addiction. In the streets of Lawrence, I have to teach my children, I have to teach students to stay away from needles that are in our park. This is a problem that is, without a doubt, widespreading. It's something that we have to work together as a community to attack. And there's not going to be one easy solution. Is having safe needle injections the right solution, or is that a possibility? Yeah, it's a possibility, but it's going to take much more than that. It's going to take breaking a very vicious cycle of addiction, and in some cases incarceration. It's going to take educating people. It's going to take putting education at a young age, educating our kids when they're in school, teaching them about the dangers of addiction. It's going to take working with our prison system and our people inside of the prisons and educating them and teaching them how to survive when they get out of prison and get jobs and train them. There's so many things that we can work on, but it has to be a community effort. It has to be working with professionals who know mental health. It has to be working with professionals that know our prisons. And it has to be working with our teachers who educate our students and our coaches and our mentors. These are all very, very important part of attacking this problem. This is a battle that's big now, but it's a battle that we've had for a long time, and we're going to have a long time in the future. It's not going to go away easy, and we have to be prepared to work with our community to tackle it together.
Thank you, Mr. Amano. Mr. Feingold, 1 minute response.
Yeah, I would I would agree a lot with what Mike said. A couple things I'd add, and you know, a couple months back I had some surgery, and after surgery I got prescribed oxycodone. Concerned about, like, there are young kids in our community that have injuries like Tommy John injury They go for surgery, and then they get prescribed opioids, and they get hooked on them. And then they can't afford to have, to pay for them, and they go to heroin. So we got to start thinking about over-prescribing of our young people. I mean, I've heard story after story, and Mike's right, like, this is in Andover, this is in Tewksbury, this is in Dracut, this is in Lawrence. This epidemic is blind to social economics. And I've talked to so many mothers that have lost loved ones to it. But a day to opioid overdoses. That's like a plane crash a day. And we have to do everything we can, but it is a multi-facet solution that we're going to have to go after. Mental health, overprescribing, helping people that have problems, giving them a different way of life. What is causing people to do these types of drugs? We have to find alternatives. I give some credit to Charlie Baker for trying to have 3-day inpatient treatment, but we need a lot more than that. We need more beds in the state, we need more facilities, and we got to help people. So this is probably one of the biggest issues of our day, but it has to be a multi-faceted approach, and there's no silver bullet here.
I'm just going to thank you, Mr. Feingold, but I am just going to go back to the original question. Do you support
I think it can be part of can be a small part of the solution, but I don't think it's a silver bullet. And I think local communities should have the right, if they don't want it, that they shouldn't have it in their community. So I think it can be part of it, but believe me, if anybody thinks that's a silver bullet, no way.
All right. Mr. Romano, would you like some additional time to respond to that?
Yeah, I just want to say I'm hearing those statistics, and Barry's right. You know, in the city of Lawrence, I was just looking at some numbers. Lawrence, I believe, was #1 in New England for the opioid deaths. Second behind Lawrence was the city of Lowell. And here we are in this district, the second Essex and Middlesex. We're surrounded by 2 big cities. And again, we are the hub of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. These 2 big cities, they offer a lot, but they also come with some problems. And these are the problems we see in cities, and these are the problems we see in this district. And it's living proof that something has to happen.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Romano. The question is for Mr. Feingold. Mr. Feingold, in your political career, you had served as state representative for a couple of terms, state senator for this particular seat, the 2nd Essex Middlesex, for a couple of terms, and then you had an unsuccessful run for state treasurer. Now, 4 years later, back running for state senate. So I think the question is a fair question to ask, is how strong is your commitment to this district, or could the residents look to see you trying to run for state office again in the future?
That's a fair question. I want to be a state senator. It is an amazing opportunity. I love this community. I love all 4 of these communities. The most amazing thing about this district is that when I was in the state senate, I could caucus with every single group. You have all different challenges. You have a city like Lawrence, which has so many different challenges. You have Andover, you have Tewksbury and Dracut, and it's an amazing district. But there are so many needs that are out there, and I want to be the leader to do that. We've never had a time in the Merrimack Valley where there's going to be such a lack of experience. We're going to have a new congressperson, and we're going to have a new state senator from Lowell. In our state senate district, there's going to be 2 new state reps. So I think having experience is a plus. And I'm ready to go from day one. And there's some huge issues that are facing this district. You know, in the previous debate, they talked about health care. I am so concerned about what's going to happen to Lowell General and Lawrence General. We continue to get unfair funding compared to the rest of the country, rest of the state. If you get an MRI done in Boston, they get reimbursed probably $200, a lot more than what they do in Lowell. So it's probably like half of it we get reimbursed. That's not fair. That directly impacts every single resident. From day one, I'm going to have the experience to do something about it. At the same time, what we get back for local funding, it's not okay. I'm not happy with only 72% reimbursement for circuit breaker. I want 100%. And when it comes to special education, I want the state to take over transportation for special education. There are so many issues out there that I want to work on, and I have experience from day one to get the job done, and I'm totally committed to being effective and being ready to go from the beginning.
Thank you, Mr. Feingold. Mr. Armano, 1 minute to respond on commitment to the seat, commitment to the district.
Well, I'm glad it takes a little bit of, I guess, political experience is important, and I'm glad I have a little bit myself. Although I've not been a politician, I do have a lot of relationships with elected officials in my role as a fire prevention official. But I think even more important, it's necessary nowadays that you know the community. So political experience is one thing, but you have to have community experience. You have to have people experience. You have to get down into these communities and work with community leaders. You have to participate. You have to coach. You have to be working in the schools. You have to work with the streets. You have to work with the homeless. You have to get down into the tents in the city of Lawrence and talk to the homeless. These are all important things to know the community. You have to get out to the restaurants. You have to eat in them. You have to help the small businesses. If you know the community, if you learn about people's stories, if you're committed to learning the stories of the people in your community, then you got to understand their values, and you're going to be able to legislate. So I'm happy with my experience. I've been deep into the Merrimack Valley my whole life. I grew up in Lawrence. I've lived in Tewksbury. I went to law school in Andover, and now I live here with my beautiful wife in Dracut. And I'm very happy with all the ties that I've made and all the people that I've met in this community. I think they understand what my campaign is about. They know it's about people. They know it's about community, and I'll be proud to take that to the State Senate.
Thank you, Mr. Armano. Next question is for you, Mr. Armano. And this is something that has become a very touchy question in a lot of communities, and it is the issue of sanctuary cities, the so-called Safe Communities Act, about Massachusetts becoming a sanctuary state. How do you feel about the Safe Communities Act, the idea of Massachusetts becoming a sanctuary state? How do you feel about, you work in Lawrence, how do you feel about communities that are sanctuary cities?
I think they're number one for Dominican-born residents. There's a large immigrant population. And being an arson investigator and a fire prevention official in the city of Lawrence, I deal with issues every day. And what I mean by that is, just last year, we was in the hospital for a couple months, and he ended up passing away. And it wasn't highly publicized because it didn't happen that day. But one of the problems we had is there were 4 other gentlemen that were living in that apartment. And we didn't have the opportunity to talk to those gentlemen because we suspect that they weren't in the country with the proper documentation. And that's a problem for us. We want to be able to go into an arson investigation. We want to be able to go into a criminal investigation, and we want to build up trust with these communities. We don't want them to be fearful of us. Do we need immigration laws? Of course we do. Absolutely, without a doubt. But we need to be able to have our local officials work with the communities that they're in, earn that trust of the community without them being fearful that we're acting as agents of the federal government. It's also about resources, and I can tell you as a firefighter in the city of Lawrence and the police department, they feel the same way. We don't want our resources to be taken away when we need enough, we need resources as it is to do our job. So it's a bad idea to have us do a second job when we need all the help we can get. And I believe, I want to say that the Safe Communities Act is endorsed by the Mass Police Association, and I think it's important to follow the lead of our law enforcement and our public safety and see what's best for them.
Thank you, Mr. Armano. Mr. Feingold, Safe Communities Act, sanctuary cities, how do you feel about those?
I think when it comes to sanctuary cities, I think it should be something that is left up to local communities that understand and know best. I also agree with Mike that we shouldn't be using our resources to be doing things of tracking down people when basically they're so overtaxed. I mean, the city of Lawrence, we don't have enough money for police officers and for firefighters, and that's why I fought and was able to get increased funding, especially for our police. Mike and I are not running for Congress. There are a lot of people who are, and I would just say that they have to step up and fix the immigration situation. It is a mess. It is not right. It is unfair. what's gone on with splitting up families is unjust. And we're all immigrants, and we can do better in this country than what we've seen. And I just think our federal government has to step up. We shouldn't be separating families, and they have to solve this problem because it cannot be solved on the local or state level.
Thank you, Mr. Feingold. Let's move on to another issue that has, again, stirred emotions in local communities, and that is the so-called bathroom bill as far as access for transgender residents to use the bathrooms of their choice. That's been an issue that has been very, again, some people have been very strongly in favor. Some people have been passionately opposed, have cited safety issues. So we'll start with you, Mr. Feingold, in the issue of transgender rights, the bathroom bill. How do you feel on that?
First of all, I support it, and it gets so overblown. And what I believe is about compassion and fairness, and we have to get away from this. This is such, we shouldn't be dividing people. We should have more civility. This is such, to me, a non-issue, and where we should respect those who are transgender and give them the rights if they choose to where they want to go. We should respect that. That's why I support it.
Thank you. Mr. Armano.
I also support, I agree with Barry. It's really about dignity and respect. And, with that being said, I went to a community group not too long ago with some transgender individuals. And I walked into the room, and it wasn't a community that I typically am involved in. In fact, it was the first time that I got to meet some transgender individuals. And still to this day, I still don't use all the correct terminology. And I went in and I was embarrassed. I didn't know how I would be taken. And I was fearful myself. So when I walked in, immediately I saw a firefighter from Cambridge, and I learned that one of his children was transgender. And he was there with the support group, just trying to understand it himself. And as I talk to people, I actually use one of the wrong pronouns. And there's a certain way of saying things. And again, I was horrified. I was embarrassed. But that person looked at me and they said, "It's okay, it's only a pronoun." They showed me so much love and so much, I guess, respect myself that it really opened up my eyes. And they understand that it's okay to fear something you're not familiar with, but we just have to treat people with dignity and respect, and that's what it's all about.
I agree.
Thank you, Mr. Armano. Let's move on to some financial issues. It was brought up in the last debate about the so-called millionaires tax that got brought up, was potentially going to be a ballot question, was deemed to be unconstitutional, was taken down on a bit of a technicality. In all likelihood, it will be reworded and brought back again. So in this case, we're going to be starting with Mr. Armano. And how do you feel about tax equity, the so-called millionaires tax? And beyond that, what changes, if any, do you see that do need to be made to the tax system?
I think we certainly need to bring equity to the tax system, and we don't have that. I mean, I'm not a millionaire. I'll never be a millionaire, likely, especially working as a firefighter. But that's okay. Regardless, even if I was a millionaire, I would say the same thing. We need equity. We need resources in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and every single person benefits from those resources, whether it's education, whether it's public safety, whether it's our infrastructure. These are things that we all need and we all benefit from. I don't buy some of the arguments that we're going to lose talent, because I guarantee there's many talented people that would step up and come to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and take the job, the millionaire job, that millionaire doesn't want anymore because they have to pay a little extra money. We have to have an equitable system.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Armano. Same question, Mr. Feingold.
You know, what I want to do is I want to work with Senator Jason Lewis and some of the other senators that have been working on this, because we have to find a solution. What that solution is, that hasn't been defined yet, but there is a major problem in our society with income inequality, and we have to do something about it. I was just, reading today that under the Trump administration, wages are down and prices are up. So the middle class is getting even squeezed even more. under this regime. So this tax break that Trump gave to all these corporations have not helped the middle class whatsoever. So in Massachusetts, we have to step up. We have to find something that is helpful for income inequality, and it's something that we got to get done.
I'm going to continue going with you, Mr. Feingold, on this because you touched on not just tax inequality, but also income inequality, and that's a good segue to ask about if you support the raise of the minimum wage to $15 an hour, and if so, why? If not, why?
100%, just because we got to bring people up. And it's just, we have to give people, like, it's amazing how expensive our state is. It's unfortunate, but even in Lawrence, right now a 2-bedroom is going for $1,500 a month. I mean, to be able to afford that, you have to make a decent amount of money, and it's getting harder and harder for people to afford. I mean, housing prices in this town have gone through the roof in every single one of our communities, and it's just getting harder and harder for people. I have young kids. I pay for ice hockey fees. It is just expensive out there, and we have to find solutions to make it easier for people in the middle class. My parents are both teachers. I know what it's like, and it's just not easy, and we have to find solutions. So I think it is a good start to raise the minimum wage. I know for some business it's not easy, but it is something that we can bring people up.
Thank you, Mr. Feingold. Mr. Armano, same question. Do you support the raise of the minimum wage to $15? If so, why or why not?
Yeah, I agree with Barry. I think the bottom line is there's some areas in the Merrimack Valley. I mean, I look at Lawrence. I know this figure off the top of my head. I was just doing some research for another project, and the median family income was about $36,000 for a family in the city of Lawrence. Now, we've all seen a big push. We've seen people moving from Boston coming up to the Merrimack Valley, and that's pushing our home values up, our taxes up, but we're strapped for resources. The bottom line is we have to bring the bottom up. It's not just bringing the bottom up to $15 an hour, but it's increasing the wages of everybody, the lower class, the middle class. This is something that we have to work on. It's not just, again, as Barry said earlier, the silver bullet. $15 is a step in the right direction, but we need to come up with ways to incentivize small businesses, because if small businesses take a hit with $15 an hour, some might, some may not, how do we help them next? But we absolutely can't, we have to do it now, and then we have to work on the rest of the solutions and bringing the economy and the people's wages up.
All right, let's continue on that vein, because we're moving in a good direction here talking about this issue. Mr. Armano, when it comes then, because I'm sure you've heard people saying small businesses can't afford to pay their employees $15 an hour. You mentioned incentivizing small businesses. What are some of your suggestions on how the state can go about helping out small businesses and helping build them up?
Sure. Well, I was a small business owner. When I was in law school, when I got out of law school, I was going back and forth on what area I wanted to practice and what I wanted to do with my life. You all learned about my long history, tradition of public service. I looked into teaching a little bit. I was waiting to become a firefighter. But as I was doing that, I was working a third shift in security, and I was starting my own practice. It's something I wanted to do. I was committed, believe it or not, to coaching high school wrestling. I was committed to working at some summer camps, and I loved doing that. So in an effort to do that, I wanted my own business. I wanted some flexibility. That wasn't easy. There's fees in Massachusetts that are expensive. Just to file an LLC, $500 every year.
Right.
And the fees go up and up and up. So what can we do if a business is truly struggling and they're small? What other things can we cut? What can we do to incentivize them so they can thrive? Now, with that being said, there are some small businesses who have come to me and they've said, I want this $15 an hour. I'll gladly pay it. And when I was a small business owner, I paid $15 an hour easily to my employees. And the reason they want it is because they feel like if we have a lower class and a middle class that makes more money, they're going to spend the money in the diners, in the little bodegas in the city of Lawrence, in the restaurants, in the small grocery stores. And that's going to help the economy. And that's what some people believe. So there's arguments on both sides, but we have to really look at who's going to be affected and how we can give an incentive to all people who need that boost in their income.
Thank you, Mr. Armano. Mr. Feingold, thoughts on how to incentivize small businesses that may take a hit from a $15 an hour minimum wage. How can the state help them out?
I think we always have to be cognizant of what we're requesting for unemployment insurance. We have to make sure that we have enough in the fund, but I think sometimes we have too much in the fund. So I think we can reduce unemployment insurance. I also think when it comes to workman's comp, I think there are certain businesses that shouldn't be assessed as much as they are. So I think that's another area as well. And I think we really need to help business with health care. I still think it's a big, when you're a small business, you have 5 or 10 people, it's hard. And I think we should allow people to have larger pools that they can join, have more flexibility in the plans that they can choose. And I think that's a way that we can be helpful to small businesses. You know, we have a great state, but it's so expensive. Another thing that I think we should also focus on, and it doesn't really affect small businesses, but our pricing for electricity. I think long term, we should get off our dependency off foreign oil, and we should be doing more solar, more renewables. And yeah, short term, there's more expense, but long term, this will be such a savings to our state. And not only will we be able to create our own power here in Massachusetts, but it's going to be a great job creator as well. So I think in the long term, reducing energy costs, and I know all of us are going to have a lot of energy costs after these last couple of days, I think it would be a huge thing for us. So I think we have to think out of the box. I think we have to think ways of helping businesses, but we also have to look in the future. And I think energy is one of our biggest ways we can save money here in the Commonwealth.
Mr. Armano, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I do agree. And I love the idea of energy. I was just speaking yesterday with a guy who was an installer of solar panels, and that was his job. And he said, business is great, but he said, we're losing some incentives for solar energy. And when we lose incentives, people are less likely to get solar panels. And that would reduce his workload. It would also reduce the workload of different small companies we have. My cousin works for a solar panel company. And these are businesses that clearly can bring great economic development and great boosts to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, not to mention you know, the incentives for the owners of these panels.
Bill, can I just add something?
Absolutely.
So I think one of the things we also have to do is we have to increase the net metering cap. It's what you can sell back to the grid. And I think it's something that will be a lot of an incentive for people. So right now, you can sell your power back for about 27 cents, and you can basically buy it back for maybe single, like 6 or 7 cents, maybe even less. So if more and more people knew about it, I think they'd be more incentivized. But the problem is you get capped, and we got to lift the cap. And something that when I was chair of energy, that is something we continue to push for, but I feel like the legislature and the governor hasn't been pushing hard enough, and we got to lift that cap and give more incentive to people to really sell back energy into the grid.
All right, thank you. The next question is for Mr. Feingold, and I guess it's the best way to frame it is that there's been some interesting changes since you last served in the state Senate. In terms of what's become legal in Massachusetts, legalized marijuana is coming down the pipe. Lancaster, near where I live, is considering putting in a horse race track, which would also have sports betting on it. I guess my question to you, Mr. Feingold, is while these things like legalized marijuana and sports gambling certainly will weigh the negatives.
Yeah, I mean, I respect the will of the voters, so I'm not going to vote to work to overchange the law. But I was not supportive of legalizing marijuana. I have no problem with medical marijuana. I want to decriminalize marijuana, but I'm just concerned about the promotion to make money off selling marijuana to people. And I'm concerned about the long-term effects, and I'm just not convinced that's great for society. But I will respect the will of the voters, and I will not try to overturn it, but I'm just concerned about the long-term effects. I would never try to tell my kid, hey, it's good for you to go out and smoke marijuana, but I don't know how anybody else can say that. That's in business, so that's why I have a lot of concern about it. As far as gaming, I just hope they put in place you know, things that help people with addiction. And, you know, you have to understand, so the MGM just opened up in Springfield, and everybody's all excited about it. They don't make money off gamblers like most of us. They make money off people that have a disease. And these are people that can't afford to have their paycheck and lose their paycheck, and that's how they make money. So now we're going to have rapid sports game where you can literally bet on every single play. And look, I play fantasy football, and I don't want to throw stones, but we got to be very, very careful about how we regulate, fantasy sports and betting on it. And I still believe that we do have a job to regulate. I do believe that we need to make sure we protect the most vulnerable. We should have compassion. We should have fairness. And I'm just concerned about what's coming down the pike. It could do more harm than good. I don't mean to be Debbie Downer, but I'm just concerned about where we're going as a society.
Before I give you a chance to respond, Mr. Romano, I wanted to extend the question. Given how you feel personally, there's going to be, it appears, some campaigning for licensing for marijuana distribution locations and whatnot. If towns within your district, if you get elected, and towns within your district ask you to lobby on their behalf for some of these licenses in your towns, do you feel comfortable lobbying on their behalf?
I think many of the communities are against it, but that is a local decision. I respect a local decision, and I don't think they need my help. But they're gonna, that's a local decision. I respect it. I just don't think that is a great thing for society. So that's just my own opinion.
All right, Mr. Romano, legalize marijuana, legalize sports gambling. Do the pros outweigh the cons on this?
I think the bottom line is the people have spoken, and every district is different. And like Barry said, you got to respect what we chose locally, but it's very important that we get on the regulation of these industries right away. And I think that's the bottom line. And not just the initial regulation, but we have to follow it. We have to make sure as things change, as we discover new benefits and burdens, that we adjust to those things. And if we do that, then we're moving in the right direction. We've already voted. We're already there. We have to move forward and get these things done.
All right. Thank you. Question for Mr. Romano. You have had a chance now to visit all of the communities within the district. As you mentioned, you live here in Dracut, you work in Lawrence, but you've had a chance to spend some time throughout the area. What have you learned about the priorities of these communities? Do they have shared priorities, or have you found that some of the different communities within the district have maybe competing priorities?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of shared priorities, and I think there's a lot of different priorities as well. So obviously there's some big things like we talked about already. Everybody talks about the opioid epidemic. That's an issue for everybody. Everybody has a friend or a family member or a loved one, and that's something that we know we have to work on together. Most people, I'd say almost everybody throughout this district, they're very concerned with public education. They want to make sure that we have public education that's strong, that our children have the resources they need to thrive, and they have all the opportunities they need to make it in this world. And then, there's different things going on. So obviously, the city of Lawrence is very different in some ways than Dracut or Tewksbury and Andover. It's one of the poorest, probably the poorest communities in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So sometimes you have people that come from a socioeconomic area where they're just trying to survive. They're trying to figure out how are we going to raise a family on $36,000 a year, and how are we going to pay for rent. And then, in other areas like Dracut, people, as they get older, they want to know, as I become a senior, how am I going to find housing? And in Tewksbury, surrounded by highways, they might want to know how are we going to alleviate traffic and make sure that we can keep up with the growing demand of resources where there's so many people moving into the area. And it goes on and on. So there are many differences, but there are also a lot of similarities. And it really takes, again, understanding the stories of the people, getting out into these communities, sitting in the traffic, seeing what our seniors are going through, seeing what our veterans are going through, seeing what our immigrant population is going through, and then understanding the schools and being inside of the schools and talking to parents and teachers and students. That's all part of it.
Thank you, Mr. Romano. Mr. Mr. Feingold, you've served this district before. What have you learned in terms of the priorities of the community, where they're the same and maybe where they're competing a little bit?
Well, I think there's a lot that they're similar. I mean, one of the big issues that I was proud to work on here is, I don't know if Joe's still around, but we worked on the new Dracut High School, and that was an amazing thing. And that has been a game changer for this community, but there's more work to do. Some of the elementary schools, Brookside, Campbell, Anglesby, like they're next up. And we have to get funding to renovate some of those schools. The elementary school I went to in Tewksbury, North Street School, was a phenomenal place to go to. It was great. The only problem is the same condition it was 40 years ago. And education has changed. So we have to get the money for school building assistance to communities like Tewksbury and Dracut. I also think that, everyone wants the same opportunity. I've been honored to have an incredible group of people that I work with on the campaign team. One of the people I work with, Shayla, she lives in Lawrence. Her dad works at UPS. Her mom drives 45 minutes a day to work at a factory. And they want opportunity. They want their daughter to have more opportunity than they did, and that's why they work so hard. And that's the same story in Tewksbury, Dracut, and Ever Lawrence. It doesn't matter what community that you're in. And I want to make sure that we give young people the opportunity. I have so many young people that are working on my campaign, and I feel so bad about how much college debt they're coming out of school with. And we got to help people with that. They shouldn't be coming out of school with $50,000, $60,000 worth of debt. We got to do better. We have to make UMass more affordable. At the same time, I also, transportation's huge. Like, I was helpful with Senator Bador, changing getting the funding for Exit 46. That has been great. The backups aren't as bad on Broadway as the way they used to be, but we have to do more. In Tewksbury, I tell the story that when I grew up in town, it would take me maybe 5 minutes to go from the center of town to 495. Now it can take 30 minutes. We have to do better with public transportation. I mean, one of the questions you asked at the previous debate about, how do you grade Charlie Baker? I think one of the areas where we've missed it is transportation. We need more dollars for infrastructure. We need more dollars for our roads. For those people that have to commute to work every day, it can take an hour and a half to get from Dracut into Boston. That's not okay. We got to do better than that. And finally, when it comes to health care, I was delivered, I should say my wife delivered 2 of my children at Lowell General and one of my kids at Lawrence General. These are great hospitals, but we are getting shortchanged from Boston, and we should be getting reimbursed more. And the legislature came so close by having a floor for what you reimburse procedures in Boston compared to the Merrimack Valley, and we got to fight and we got to get that done because it's just not fair. We're getting shortchanged, and it's affecting all of our health care in this district. So those are examples of what communities like Andover, Lawrence, Tewksbury have in common, and those are some of the things I'm going to be fighting for if I have the opportunity to go back there.
Mr. Romano, I let Mr. Feingold go a little long on that, so I'd like to give you a chance to respond or speak on are the towns of the district getting their fair share, and if not, how would you go about fighting for more dollars for this area, for the businesses, for the communities?
Yeah, I think when it comes to resources and fighting for resources for the Merrimack Valley, this is, I guess this is the job of our state legislature. You have to do this today, you have to do this tomorrow. It's something that we'll always need. Our buildings will fall apart, and I think of firehouse-wise, the Dracut Firehouse that we have a question on the ballot coming up. And I think of sitting over at Engine 8 on Ames Street. I work in fire prevention, but we're in an old firehouse. And not to get too graphic here, but I walk into the bathroom, I sit on the toilet, and there's a big hole on the ceiling, and the thing drips on my head. And I think to myself, what is going on? If this is happening in the firehouse, what other buildings are like this? In fact, again, in the firehouse, and this is just fire stations, in the city of Lawrence, we have our floors falling in our firehouses. In Dracut, we don't have adequate rooms so that our guys can take off our gear and be protected from toxins that cause cancer. And cancer is something that plagues the fire service. So we're looking for public safety. We're looking to protect the people who work in the buildings. We're looking for safe infrastructure that will make things easier, like Barry said, an easier commute out of the city. There's a lot going on in the Merrimack Valley. Again, we're surrounded by 2 big cities. And there's a lot of people, there's a strong workforce. And we really have to make sure that we have the resources that we need to bring that workforce home and help them build the economy throughout these cities and throughout the district.
Very good. All right. Final question of the evening, and I'm going to. We promised not to do any gotchas, and I'm not going to do a gotcha here, but I am going to ask the candidates to, I guess, share a little bit, maybe personally here. It's a question that I ask at all of the debates that I moderate, because I think that it's important for anybody running for office, anybody holding office, to acknowledge that that they are human and that they grow and that they look to improve themselves. So I guess this question starts with Mr. Feingold. I'd like to ask, what is a mistake that you have made that you have learned an important lesson from in your life? It could be personally, it could be professionally, but something that you look back and say, that was an error, but I learned from that. And this will be a question that both of you get the same amount of time for.
I think some of the times where you're too quick to make a decision and you don't do enough listening. I think over time I've got better at it, but when I was younger, I'd be too rash to make a quick judgment. And I think the biggest mistake of people in public life is, and I know this is cliche, and I know many people have said it, there is a reason why you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and you really need to make sure you listen more than you speak. And I think there are times where I was too quick to speak and I wasn't quick enough to listen. And one of the things I'm very proud about is I've knocked on over thousands of doors. My team has knocked over thousands of doors. I've been out 100-degree heat on Broadway knocking doors. But the reason why I do that, obviously you want to get votes, of course, but I'm there to listen. I've learned so much. I've learned so much talking to people, listening to them, hearing what's on their mind. And I think that's the most important thing that you can do as a public servant, is to listen. And I always want to be the person that says, you know what, I might have, Barry might have disagreed with me, but at least he gave me a chance to explain what I thought. And it gave me a chance to explain why I felt the position was a certain way. Because the hard thing when you're in public service is that, half the time you're going to make people happy, half the time you're not going to make people happy. But I think the one thing you can do is you can listen. And it's something that I think I've got better over the years. But when I was a little younger, I was a little too quick and said maybe I thought I knew it. But one thing I'm
learned something from.
I would have to say the mistake of assumption is dangerous, and I guess I'll get real personal with a story, might as well. So, I graduated from high school in 1996. In 1998, I was at UMass Lowell, and I remember taking a ride with a good friend of mine. And I went to Central Catholic High School. I was the vice president of my class over there, and one of my best friends was the president of the class. And now he's a teacher over at St. John's Prep. And I remember in 1998, my best friend, he was a strong leader, charismatic, great guy. And he told me in 1998, times were different. He said, Mike, I have something to tell you. He said, I'm gay. And I said, wow, I didn't see that coming. I didn't think anything of it. I said, wow, so what's the big deal? He said, I struggled a long time for me to tell you this. He said, but when I was in high school, I used to have suicidal thoughts. And I felt bad about myself. I said, why? He said, well, everybody in high school, they used to say, you're a fag, you're a fag. Not to him, but to everybody. We went to an all-boys high school. It was just a word that was thrown around. And when he said that, I said to him, I said, Joel, who said that to you? And he said, Mike, you did. And when he ever said that, of course, I had a tear coming down my eyes. Here he was, my best friend, a strong leader, so respected by so many people. And yet I was maybe the cause of him committing suicide. So from that day forward, I think a lot about assuming where people come from and who they are and what they do. And it's taught me a very valuable lesson in life. And I think back today when I now deal with homeless people. I brought a couple homeless guys in my car down to Salem, Mass. They were witnesses for an arson investigation. And instead of drawing conclusions, I sat there and I wanted to know their story. And I learned a lot about them. And I learned about some of the struggles they had with addiction. And whether it was mental health issues that drove them into addiction, or being a high school athlete that got addicted to drugs while being injured, whatever it was, they had a common theme. They had a story. They talked about some of the people in the streets that were really their family, and they talked about Johnny and Susie who dropped dead, and they just saw it as, you know, this could be us next. It was a struggle that they were facing. One of those guys, sadly enough, I still haven't seen him in a year, and I don't know what happened to him, but I suspect the worst, unfortunately. And seeing that in the city of Lawrence, seeing that throughout the district, like Barry said, I completely agree. Everybody does have a story. And when you talk to people and you understand their story, I think it gives you the values you need to be a strong, zealous advocate in the legislature. And that's important. And we have so much diversity, especially in this district. Think of what we are. We're the city of Lawrence, the town of Dracut, the town of Tewksbury, the town of Andover. There are so many people coming from different nations, different parts of the world, different parts of the country. But yet we can come together if we understand the values of people and we don't draw conclusions about people.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. We have reached the end of our questions, and we are moving into the closing statements.
So you're not going to ask us who our favorite Red Sox is?
I am not.
Come on, huh?
All right.
I was waiting for that one the whole time.
All right. Well, Mr. Feingold, favorite Red Sox player?
So right now it's clearly Mookie Betts, but I'm a Kevin Millar. I love he was a scrapper back in his day, so I'm a huge fan of Kevin Millar. You know, I like the clean clap for that too. And way back when I was a punch fist guy, so.
Oh, no, see, that was my guy. So
generational. So.
All right, I've got to ask Mr. Armano then, favorite Red Sox player.
Mookie's not that bad, but speaking of history, how can you not love Big Papi and Pedro? Oh,
no doubt.
There's so many. We could go on and on. Tough question. Toughest question of the night, actually.
There you go. All right. Moving into the closing statements, as we said, Mr. Armano going first. Each candidate will get 1 minute. Mr. Armano.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. I noticed a mass exodus when we left, and I said, I don't know if it was something I said or Barry said.
It's like being the opening act in Las Vegas.
I think we're both very thankful that you all stayed here tonight and listened to us. Thank you so much. Thank you, Bill, and thank you for Dracut Access. You know, I'm hoping to bring a new generation of leadership to the Merrimack Valley, to the 2nd Essex and Middlesex District. It's been a long campaign. My wife can attest. She's been a saint since February. We've been going at this, and I know Barry and his wife probably feel the same way. And we've learned a lot. We've met a lot of great people. We've had some good food on the campaign trail, too. Some nice blueberry cake and some roasted pork. We met a couple that was been married for 72 years in Dracut, and their anniversary was on the 4th of July. Great people. They had us in the house. Throughout all these experiences, again, we've talked to a lot of people. We've gone to a lot of events. And I'm proud to say today that, you know, we've earned the support of dozens of organizations. I think we're at 32, 33 organizations. Strong organizations like the Mass Teachers Association, the American Federation of Teachers, the firefighters, the laborers, Verizon workers, Raytheon workers, textile workers. So many people have grown to understand what my campaign is about. It's a campaign about working class people. It's a campaign about the community. It's a campaign about people who know what it takes and how difficult it is sometimes in life just to survive, just to go through the day-to-day. And that's what my campaign is. It's not about Mike Armano. It never has been, and it never will be. You know, there's so many issues that we struggle with in the Merrimack Valley. You all know it. You've seen it your whole lives. So many struggles we've had for a long time, so many struggles we have today, and so many struggles we will have in the future. And I'm proud to say that with you, with your stories, with your teamwork, being part of this campaign, getting to know what Armano for Senate is all about, we can do this together. We can work together and make the community stronger. There are so many similarities throughout this district. And when we get to know each other, when we support each other, when we use our talents together, we can get a lot done. So I invite you, please be part of Armano for Senate campaign. Vote for Mike Armano September 4th. I thank you so much for listening to me and for listening to Barry. And I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Armano. Went a little long. We certainly will give you plenty of time, Mr. Feingold.
Well, first of all, thank you, Bill, for sponsoring this debate. Also, Dracut Access for filming this. Thank all of you for staying as well. We appreciate it. And I personally also want to thank my wife. We have 3 kids. It's not easy running campaigns and busy. We also have a dog, Otis, too. So we have a lot going on in the house, so I personally want to thank her. You know, this is an amazing district. Andover, Lawrence, Tewksbury, and Dracut. But what's really special about Dracut is, I think it was a couple Saturdays ago, Keith Welch, who's an amazing person, who's been such a diehard for this town, had a function to help him raise money because he's had a really tough battle with cancer. And you see the fabric of what Dracut's all about when you go to one of these things. And I could tell you story after story of different functions that I've gone to. And that truly is what makes Dracut unique. And that's what fires me up. I want to have the opportunity to represent this community again because I want to be a relentless advocate for this community. And there are things that we have to get done. We have to, like we did with the Dracut High School, there's some elementary schools that need some fixing. Brookside, Anglesby, Campbell. Those are things that I want to work with your local school committee, your selectmen, and if they decide that those schools need state funding, I'm going to get that school funding for this community. Special education, it is hurting our communities, and it's so unfair because it pits families of special educations against other families. What I want to do is I want to get circuit breaker up to 100%, not 72%. And I want to make sure, I want the state to take over transportation, because not only do I think this would save money for towns like Dracut, but I actually think having a regional approach would be so much better. The Community Preservation Act, Mechanesby Park, that is a wonderful thing we have here in the community. I want to make sure we continue to have the CPA and people don't try to divert money from it, so we continue to have open space, do more things with parks. I think that's so important for communities like Dracut. The opioid crisis, it is such a major factor. It has to be a multifaceted approach. And I want to work with local leaders, the governor, the legislature to make sure we find a solution that truly works. Helping our senior circuit breaker. We need to make sure that stays in place. We need to make sure that seniors get the help they need. So many seniors have been here for a long time and they can't afford to stay in communities like Dracut. That's not fair, that's not right, and we need to make sure that we find solutions like the senior circuit breaker tax credit. I'm also proud that I've been endorsed by many great organizations like the Teamsters, the plumbers and gas fitters, Makufu, to go on and on. So I'm very proud about who's been backing my campaign. But the one thing I'll never forget is that my family started off in government housing. I got a shot. I went to good schools. I was able to go to college because I was able to take out student loans and get financial aid. And then I was able to get a job, and I was able to pay for my own law school. And when I wanted to start a business, I had a local bank that gave me a hand up, that allowed me to get a loan. And I've had success. But I'm worried about the next people. I see some of the younger people in this audience tonight. Are they going to have the same shot that we did? It is so expensive to buy a house. It's so expensive to buy a car. Wages are going down. Prices are going up. We have to find solutions to help the middle class. I'm a product of that. My parents are both teachers. I remember my dad working 4 jobs, and I've never forgotten where I've come from. I want to respectfully ask for your vote on September 4th. My name is Barry Feingold. I'm running for state senate. Thank you so much.
All right, so concludes our state senate Democratic primary debate for the 2nd Essex Middlesex District. I'd like to thank the candidates, Barry Feingold, Mike Armano, for participating tonight. I'd like to thank the American Legion for providing the facility for the event. I'd like to thank DATV for partnering with us. Just a reminder, you'll be able to watch this debate a number of different places, and I'm sure you've got friends, family who weren't here this evening. Let them know they can see it starting tomorrow night on DATV, channel 99 at 7 p.m. It'll be broadcast several other times. It'll also be on the DATV video on demand page. It will also be on yourdracuttoday.com, and for Tewksbury residents, yourtewksburytoday.com. One final reminder, we are raising some funds for the Dracut Food Pantry. There's a blue bucket back there, so we'd like to thank you for that. And I'd like to thank everyone who came tonight. I'd like to echo what the gentleman said. For those of you who stayed for both debates, God bless you for caring about your community and for having the passion to be a part of the system. To quote a certain Democratic mayor from Chicago, September 4th is the primary. Vote early, vote often. So, I'm Bill Gilman, your Dracut today. Thank you. Have a very pleasant evening.
Well done, Mike. Good job. Good job.